Hello and welcome to the Dream Architect Life with Bryan Sweet and Brittany Anderson from Sweet Financial Partners. Bryan, I'm coming to you today. Can you give us a recap of what that last podcast was?
Absolutely, Eric. Nice to be here again. Yeah, the last podcast we talked about possibility comes to those who create it. And maybe the best way to explain the podcast is by a quote. And the quote goes, "Every great opportunity has many reasons why it could fail. You have to trust your ability to solve problems along the way. People who look for reasons why things won't work struggle to take action. But people who look for reasons why things will work and solve problems as they arise make things happen." And we just talked about some examples of how that is so true. And we're just going to take that subject and expand on it a little bit more and talk a little bit about what possibility means to you. And I'm going to turn it over to Brittany, who will take us from there.
Yeah, we rounded it out by talking about intentionality and making sure you have a path and not being that arrow that just shoots into outer space with no target, nothing to aim for. So, to carry on that theme and really open us up for what today is going to be about too, is we want our audience members to really think, if you are, and whether you call it visioning, you call it working on a dream board, you call it just thinking about the future, as simplistic as that. If you don't know where you want to go and what you want for your life, it is really, really darn hard for other people to help you get there. So that's really where we rounded out last episode in talking about how you can get on that path, examples of what that looks like, and really starting to define what possibility means to you.
Well, what you did round out last podcast with was a promise, right? You've got tools and resources, and I find that very exciting. And that's part of what you're going to be talking about today, is because, again, without a map, you can't get to your destination. And without the right tools or vehicles, again, it's going to be a very long journey if you're stuck. So you talked about tools. You talked about tips, hints, and tricks, I think is kind of where we're going with this. Let's start that. How do you help people do this?
Yeah, so I can take that and just reiterate what we talked about in the last episode. We have a toolbox, a retirement readiness center. If you just go to mysweetfinancial.com, it is the easiest way to get access. So there are tools that we talk about mindset. You can start planning out your future. You can start looking at, what power words are meaningful to you. You can lay out really what you want to see happen for your future, the legacy that you want to leave, and just get your brain stimulated. I think people get so used to when you're in the working phase of life, you know exactly what you're waking up to do. You wake up, you get dressed, you do your hair, you do your makeup if you're a gal, and you go to work. And that's your job. And if you have kids, you have responsibilities with that. And if you have grandkids, you have responsibilities with that. If you own a business, you have things that are consuming your mind that are business related. So it's not hard to really define what your purpose is when you know what you're doing every single day. Now, all of a sudden, you take that same individual and you pivot into a future that's maybe uncertain, that you don't know exactly what you're going to do. You might think, oh gosh, I'm going to play a lot of golf and I'm going to hang out with my friends and I'm going to have lunch dates and coffee dates and, all of that great stuff that I just never had time to do. And then you do it for like 3 weeks and you're like, all right, well, what else? So when we talk about possibility and we talk about vision, it's not just woo-woo. I mean, this is stuff that applies to really every human being. It's just deciding what you want your future to look like and creating that path to get there. It really boils down to that.
All right. And we spoke last time about not only creating that path, but having somebody help you along that path. I mean, maybe an accountability partner or a cheerleader or a coach. Let's talk a little bit about that too, in case somebody didn't hear the last podcast, which again, I'd encourage you to go listen to, but how does that play into this when you're creating that vision board or your list of goals?
Yeah. So I'll start on this one. And Bryan, I know you'll have stuff to add here. So, when we look at our role, again, you're listening to this and, we are a wealth planning firm. That's about as simple as you can put it. But what people don't realize is that your financial advisor, your wealth advisor, really has an opportunity to become so much more than that. So if you think about it, you are trusting a person to handle your life savings. So what fun is it? And when you think about, really what you're trying to do for your future, to just pass that off and be like, okay, great. Yep. I feel comfortable with the investment strategy. You need to understand what you want your money to do for you. How are you going to put that money to work for you? So when you talk about an accountability partner, the thing that we find the most joy in, and I know Bryan feels this way too, is really being able to help people plan for the exciting things in their life, for helping them do things that they never thought was possible. But because they have a very intentional plan that they have spent the time to work through, they have dealt with professionals who do this every single day, who help people retire every single day.
Mhm.
It allows them to then create that path, create that intentionality, and build really what is a bigger future. So, Bryan, I'm sure you can think of, so many different instances where you've had the opportunity to be that coach or that cheerleader and be that guide alongside somebody.
Yeah, sometimes that's all you really need to do is be that cheerleader, if you will, because giving that little helpful hand, or boy, that was really great that you were able to continue that deposit streak or whatever it is, just keeps people doing the right duties to get to their goals. And one of the things that we spend a tremendous amount of time on, and everybody will go through it at some point, is retirement. And I don't really like that word, because if you look it up in the dictionary, it means kind of like put out to pasture. And I don't think any of us want to be put out to pasture. But anyway, that's the word that I guess is in the English language. But where a lot of people, as Brittany kind of alluded to, lose track is they want to retire from whatever their experience is now. They don't like work or the people they work with or whatever. But you really need to think of it more like, what am I going to retire to?
Mhm.
And because the to is where you're going to spend all of your time. And that's where you need to get creative, and you need a helping hand to look at all the possibilities, because most people spend all their days working and with their kids, and nothing ever comes up with the future. And so we're going to be that cog that helps you think through those things, but be intentional so that whatever that turns out to be, and hopefully we can get you to think much, much bigger than you would have ever thought, because the most times what we see is people can accomplish so much more than they've ever thought they could. It's just that somebody needs to show them and give them some guidance. And once they're there, they like that. But this retirement too is so critical. And then one of the things we'll spend a lot of time on the podcast as we go forward, and we'll have lots of guests, is the longevity issue. And so we want to make sure that if we get you to retirement, that you have a lot of time so that you can enjoy it and be in great health. So, being 65 but feeling like 45 might be a great thing. But if you're going to also live longer, we got to make sure you're planning for that. And so there's so many things going on with technology and medical breakthroughs that literally they think living to 120 is going to be quite possible in the near future. And we fortunate to have met lots of the people that are on this cutting edge of all of this longevity issues. And so we'll be sharing those really fun things also as we continue to progress in the podcast.
Yeah. You guys give me so much to think about, little nuggets here and there, right? Of just gold. Brittany, one of the things you said is you guys help people retire all the time. Most people in the United States, they get to retire one time. You want to get it right, right? You want to do it right. And so and Bryan, you brought up longevity. I just a personal quick story. My dad is 82 years old. He retired at 55. He retired from Boeing, in fact. And before that, he was in the Air Force for 20 years. So he had his ducks in a row, if you will. But at 55, he retired. He's coming upon 30 years of retirement. And in that retirement, he started with my mom, a rhododendron garden, like a nursery. They used to sell rhododendrons in Washington State. They went down to Costa Rica for 5 years and retired, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes on a podcast, retired down there for 5 years. And then now they live near us, and he's done woodworking, and now he's volunteering at a place that helps people that are down on their luck. He helps them get food. He helps them he is always going and doing something, but he retired from the job that he had, but he's had probably 4 or 5 jobs.
Yeah, great
that he
story,
enjoys
Eric. I
doing,
love. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that it falls right in line with exactly what you're talking about. I don't think my dad envisioned his future doing all the things that he's actually done. He knew he was done with Boeing and he was going to retire from there, and he knew that next phase was going to be a rhododendron garden, but beyond that, nothing. He had no idea where he'd be living. I don't think he'd ever thought he'd come back to Nebraska, to live. But here they are, and he loves it. So I agree 100%. Longevity is a huge issue. Helping people to visualize this. And I'm going to admit to the audience, I'm a bit sick, so I'm not on video because you don't want to see me, trust me. But I was cheating. I was totally cheating while they were talking because I went to the website and I already signed up for the toolbox. There is a ton of stuff in here, guys. This is amazing to me. And one of the first things that I'm seeing when under the Mindset Matters category is Brittany. Well, first of all, your face is on here, which is fantastic, but it talks about
much better than mine, by the way, Eric.
But it says, it's talking about the mindset matters because fears can really, truly guide us. And we don't want the fears to guide us. We want the possibilities to. So again, bringing it back to what you guys have already said, I want to know more tools. I just want to soak up more. So when you're talking about, again, my dad never knew that he would be a great grandfather, which he is. So he's loving spending time with them. You talk about kids and grandkids, and you talk about envisioning what that future could look like. How do you help folks envision things that they never even thought possible?
That is such a good question. And, I just think it's so interesting. And we're in the heart of the Midwest. I mean, we are in southern Minnesota, and we have so many of our clients. I mean, we've joked about this, like Mr. Sweet over here. He is a world traveler. He has been to so many cool places and done just amazing things that people can't even fathom. But his path and his choices aren't necessarily what everybody wants. So we find that some of our clients, I mean, we think about like the good old boys and the good old girls that grew up on farmland and have just, this is where they've been. This is their life. And what they want is to spend so much time with their grandkids. They want to take them fishing in the summer. They want to go on a vacation in the winter. They want to be able to create experiences, and they live a lifestyle that's really simple and it's super fulfilling to them. So the foundation that we really want to help people lay, and this is really the conversations that we're having with clients, is you don't have to have it all figured out right now. I liken it back, like think back to when you graduated high school and everybody's asking you the question, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to go to school for? What do you want to do with your life? And you're like, I'm still living with my mom and dad right now. I hope I have food next week.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing, but at a different stage when you get to retirement. You don't have to know. Your dad didn't have to know that he was going to go live in Costa Rica for 5 years. But I would bet you, and I don't know your dad. I wouldn't know him if I ran smack dab into him in the middle of the road. But I would bet that in his mind, he knew that there was a lot of possibility with the time that he had.
Absolutely.
And all that we're asking is, use the tools to get your brain going. And I think too, and this is a really important point that we talk about a lot, and you'll hear this a lot in the podcast. There are unfortunately a lot of people out there that might naysay what you want to do. You might be talking about this in a friend circle. Maybe you have a dream of, let's just say you live in snowy Minnesota where we are, and you're like, you know what? I kind of hate the winter. I want to go south and I want a place down south. And you might have, a friend or two that are like, oh, well, it must be nice. Or, oh, do you really want to leave? And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm second guessing myself because of the negativity that I'm hearing. So part of those tools and part of the resources we provide is basically you need to set aside anybody else's thoughts and just focus on what you want. It's the only way that you will make progress. And if there's a bunch of financial tools, which Bryan could talk way more too, but there's a lot of tools out there that our advisors can tell you. If you have an idea and it's just not financially feasible, We will tell you that, but we'll also give you some ideas for alternatives and show you those scenarios in black and white so you can make an informed decision versus just not even bringing it up and trying because somebody told you it was a dumb idea. So those are the kind of things that we really try to help people kind of work through and saying, take it like anything's possible. Just sit down and go through this. Sky's the limit. There's no ceiling. You're able to really think about what you want for the future. That's what matters.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Brittany. I think one of the biggest inhibitors to people living this amazing life is their circle of friends and acquaintances that are naysayers. And you'll hear us talk a lot about that in the book that's coming out soon. We have a whole chapter on that topic. And you got to be really careful who you listen to, and anything negative. I personally look for some new friends. But, I think the way you want to look at this, and your dad's a great example. Life is a journey, and you don't know exactly what to expect, but you want to be open to the possibilities of, hey, I might take up growing rhododendrons, or I might want to move to Costa Rica. And you may not know that till you get there, but having the ability to be able to do that is really key. And one of the things that we help our clients do is really decide what it is you want, because really the only people that matter are you, your thoughts, and your spouse or your children and your family. And whatever you want to accomplish, that's what we're going to help you get. And don't let somebody else sway you to not do something that you feel deep down in your heart is really important or something I'd love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because that exact situation happened. An aunt and uncle, no, but none of us really listen to anymore because they're nuts. But the first
you
thing
get another bonus point for,
That's right.
ditching the rallies. Yeah,
that's right. But the first thing they said was, well, you don't speak fluent Spanish. What are you going to do down there? Oh, come on now. Really? You're going to let that stop you? Those the naysayers, they're all out there. And I think it's because they're not bold enough to dream big. Right. And I think that that's a huge thing that you help people do. So I want to ask you kind of a deep question. How much do your values as a person, as a human being, play into these dreams that you're building? Obviously, we want to follow our values. We want them to be first and foremost a lot of times, but at the same time, sometimes it may interfere with some of our bigger dreams.
Brittany, that's right up your alley.
Yeah, so I can absolutely take this one. I think back, and I've referenced this quote probably a million times in my life up to this point, but Roy Disney, he was the brother of Walt. He was the behind the scenes guy, if nobody knows that. But he has a quote where he said, making decisions is not hard once you know what your values are. And I think that is so true in every aspect of life. A lot of times when you're faced with a major life transition, and I'm going to open this up across the board a little bit, whether it's retirement, it could be the loss of somebody really close to you, a spouse, a parent, a child, like all of those horrible things that nobody wants to have happen, but are part of life. If you don't have that foundation of what your values are, what they mean to you, it becomes really difficult to move forward. And Eric, you said something that I think is so true. And I want to press on this a little bit, is I think that it's not that naysayers are bad people. That's not the case. It's that there's fear taking over. And again, when you think about, Bryan used the word intentional in the last episode. If you think about intentionality and planning and creating scenarios to see if you're making the right decisions, what does that do? It reduces the fear, the anxiety, and the uncertainty that can come with making decisions for your future. So that's why, again, if you're listening and you're not into the fluffy dream big, bright future kind of stuff, if you want to get really practical with this whole process, the whole concept of our dream architect process that is how Sweet Financial Partners does business, it is basically setting a plan, creating intentionality, and helping you stay the course to what you have said is true to you. not what we identify for you, not what we believe, not Mr. Sweet, wanting to dive in a cage with great white sharks as one of his bucket list things, but what's meaningful to you. That's the stuff that matters. And again, that's what makes a difference.
Yeah, I think, Brittany, just to take one step further on that, I think when you're intentional, the results are much more predictable. And impulsive decisions are really what get people in trouble. And we try to help eliminate that, reduce that, and add some intentionality.
Yeah, I was just thinking that exact same thing. When you said intentional, I'm thinking just the flip side of that coin is impulsive. And I think we've all been there. We've made some impulsive decisions.
Absolutely.
We won't talk about the minivan my
Human
wife
nature.
Leased.
Yeah. That'd be a really long podcast if I had to explain all mine.
Well, I'm telling you, it's more like we'd be on a couch with some therapy going on. But anyway, impulsiveness is tough to overcome sometimes. And so how do you help people get past that impulse to do something? I mean, obviously you're helping them create this list of goals, this list of dreams. You're helping them to make intentional decisions with their money, their time, their finances, all of it. How do you help them overcome those impulsive times?
Yeah. And one, it's not like instantaneous. You can do it because, being impulsive is somewhat of a learned behavior. But one of the things we really are try to do, and we can make some major strides. And one of the big initiatives we have at the firm is to improve this, but showing you what the future looks like and what the experience will be if you're intentional versus keeping the same path you're on and doing things that you're doing. Very dramatic difference. A lot of people aren't, woo-wooed or find the difference in numbers. So, creating the way that people can understand and have the biggest impact on them is really what we're trying to do. The number part's really, really easy, but that's not always the motivating thing. But it's really getting them to be in a place in the future that if they were to do something different and follow this path that meets only their objectives, this is what you're going to experience. And if you keep doing the path that you're on, a lot of these things that are important to you will never happen. And what's most important? And then you make the decision in which direction you want to go.
All right. Well, I'm gonna really challenge you here, because I think some people work with intentionality. They make decisions to try to be intentional, but they make the wrong decisions, right? Their intentions, maybe they're even good intentions, but it's not a good decision. So how do you help somebody overcome that either behavior or pattern in their life, or, even if it's a 1 or 2 time decision that has done something terrible to their finances?
Yeah, I will start with that, and Brittany, interject. We have a platform, our wealth management system, if you will, that literally we plug in all of the different variables to see what the outcomes are. And then it gives us some statistical numbers or success rates based on if I did it this way versus that way versus another way, which is the greatest likelihood of success or to get to your goal with the most effective means. And we have just tried to train clients before you make any decision, just simply call us. Let's run it through these filters and let it tell us what it tells us. And then if we don't like the numbers or like the results, then we got to do some more tweaking to figure out, well, what else do we need to change to get there? But you just never want to make a decision where down the road you go, I wish I would have checked into that. I would have done it differently. If you just do that up front, it's amazing. It maybe sounds, too simple, but really, when you do it that way, we really run into clients that have problems because they already know what to expect in advance. And it's, we try to simplify it because people love simple things, but that's really what we suggest clients do, is just let's run it through our analysis and just see what it says. And then, we'll make some decisions if we need to.
Yeah. And I do want to add one thing to that too. Our advisors here at Sweet Financial, We are fiduciary advisors. So that's a fancy word, but really what it boils down to is our job is to always act in your best interest, point blank. So if you're making a decision, regardless of how well-intended it is, if it is not in your best interest, if it diverts you from what you have identified in our initial stages and in our maintenance mode that you have said is important to you, and it's going to throw you off, we will tell you that, right? That's our job. Our job, if you think about a true accountability partner, I think about a trainer at the gym. Do you want a trainer that you go and you're like, well, shoot, I ate half a pie and a whole pizza last night. And if they were like, oh, it's okay, it's fine, that's probably not the right trainer. The same thing goes for a financial advisor. If you experience indifference in your decisions, that's probably a red flag. That's probably a problem. I'll give this example because this is a tough one and it's hard to navigate this, but it's, I think, just such the perfect example for what we're talking about. If you are somebody who you have grown kids, grown adult children, and those children, for whatever reason, tend to continue to depend on you for their finances. We've had to have some really tough conversations with clients to say, hey, we know that your son, your daughter, they do lean on you heavily, but here's what this is going to do to your plan. If you keep doing this and you keep giving in per se, this is how it could negatively impact you. And what we try to explain is that, we understand you want to help. That's an identified value. Your family, your kids, those are things that are important to you. But if it's going to make it so that you could run out of money, or you have to completely change your lifestyle because of somebody else's maybe less than good opinion or good actions, then that's a problem. So again, it's well-intended and we totally understand and empathize with that. But again, if we're acting in your best interest, we have to tell you when that's maybe not the best choice for you. What you do from there is up to you, but that's important for us to point out.
Plus, we can serve as being the bad guy and telling them, no, you can't have it versus them.
Amen.
That's a really, really good point. But I love the fact that you're willing to have that hard conversation in the first place. And I think that that's the value of a strong relationship. And I know that that's what you strive for with everybody that you work with. And even the folks that you're not working with, you still want to have those strong relationships to be able to speak into their lives. So I love that.
Really good point, Eric. And I mean, we look at every client we take on. We work with a select number of clients, but we look at them as lifetime clients. And so I've been in the business, this is my 43rd year. I've still got clients that have been with me for 43 years. So our goal is not to just start the relationship and have it go for a year or two. We want you to be with us as long as you're here on earth and living the life that we're helping you build.
That is fantastic. Well, we are running short on time for today's podcast, but I don't want to leave here without giving Bryan, I think I'm going to go to you. I want you to have an opportunity. What are some good closing thoughts for today?
Well, I opened with a quote, and I think maybe I'll end with a quote that maybe summarizes everything we've talked about. And it goes, when you focus on problems, you'll have more problems. When you focus on possibilities, you'll have more opportunities.
Man, that is fantastic. I do hate to be dishonest here, but I am going to go to Brittany for one more thing. We need contact info. I mean, honestly, number one, remind people where they can go to the toolbox, but more importantly, if somebody's listening to this going, man, I would really love some help on this journey. I don't want to leave today without some possible contact information.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Eric. You can go for access to the Retirement Readiness Center toolbox. You can go to mysweetfinancial.com. Easy way to just get a hold of our office. You can email me direct, Brittany@sweetfinancial.com. I'm not going to be the person that you necessarily meet with. You don't necessarily want me to be the one advising on that. But we have wonderful, talented people, and I can point you in the direction that you need to go to really decide if we're a good fit for each other and if it makes sense. So Brittany@sweetfinancial.com.
Bryan and Brittany, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Appreciate it.
And our last thank you always goes to you, listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Dream Architect Life podcast with Bryan Sweet and Brittany Anderson. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Bryan and Brittany come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Sweet Financial Partners, this is Eric Johnson reminding you that possibility comes to those who create it. We'll see you next time.